Thank you so much, Cami, for sharing that wisdom and reflection questions that I know we'll be thinking about as we continue on. And so there are, oh, can we actually get our next slide? Yeah, so there are additional ways to support. You can support through NAFCON's Bionihan response to COVID-19. And here are also some organizations fighting against anti-Blackness and police brutality, and also some Black-led LGBTQ organizations. We feel like it's really important to highlight and elevate these folks. Next slide, please. Awesome, thank you. And so what is the Filipinx Health Initiative SF? So we are a collective whose purpose is to bridge health and wellness resources for and by the San Francisco Filipinx community. We're an affiliate of the National Alliance of Filipino Concerns, also known as NAFCON. And just to add to that, our points of unity include: one, empowering Filipinx communities in the San Francisco Bay Area; two, preserving and celebrating Filipinx culture and heritage; three, promoting the rights, health, and well-being of Filipinxes; and lastly, advocacy for Filipinx communities in the US and as well in the Philippines. And so if y'all have any questions about who we are, or even about these presentations moving forward, feel free to DM your questions to Erin, and we'll make sure to have your questions answered. And then next slide, please. Cool. So we have a really awesome set of folks to present today. Like I said, this week we'll be talking about Filipinx Fil-Am mental health. And so for our first presentation, it will be led by Aurora Sanchez and Maryl Mallorca from the Filipino Advocates for Justice. And so Aurora Sanchez is from Union City, California. She graduated from the University of California, Davis with a BS in psychology. And she started her work at Filipino Advocates for Justice in 2017 as a volunteer for tenant organizing and youth leadership development, and later became a community outreach worker. She now runs Tayo and Queer Collective, support groups for transition age youth, emphasizing on mental health, life skills, and professional and personal development. And also Maryl is the transition age youth outreach intern at Filipino Advocates for Justice. And at this time, she's also the main coordinator for FHI's COVID Relief Fund. She has a BA in both human development, focused in adolescence, and in sociology at California State University, East Bay. Throughout her college career, she has held numerous leadership positions with Alpha Phi Omega and Filipinx American Student Association, also known as PASA. Her ongoing focus is on intergenerational healing and wisdom, as well as advocating to change mental health stigma. She also organizes with Lead Filipino and their Awareness in Action programming. So can we give a big virtual round of applause for Aurora and Maryl? Awesome. So we'll pass over the screen to y'all.
Shoot, how do we full screen this?
The present button.
Boy, I lost it. Uh-oh. Where's that? Okay, well, can we just leave it like this? It's fine. Okay, hi everyone. My name is Aurora. I'm the community outreach worker at Filipino Advocates for Justice.
And I'm Maryl. I am the mental health outreach intern.
Okay, so introduction. So Filipino Advocates for Justice just launched their mental health mental health campaign just last year, early 2019, when we onboarded some new staff for focusing on developing a program surrounded by mental health. We already had prevention and early intervention programs in place for youth as well as domestic workers, but we wanted to give more access to mental health care at our organization in the form of one-on-one counseling. But because of, community wellness, that ties in with a lot of social justice efforts that FHI does, such as working with undocumented folks and their immigration status, tenant organizing, civic engagement, and all of these things together are factor into community wellness and mental well-being because of the way it impacts their access to basic needs. So with that, we can see how social justice does affect our mental health and well-being with respect to our communities. So why did we choose this topic of mental health, and why is it personal to us? Well, for me, as someone who struggled with mental health in the past, especially in college, I was struggling with my studies. I used to be a STEM major, pharmaceutical chemistry before all of this, and I really struggled with coming to terms with the fact that I wasn't super great at the subject, and I was just trying to live up to the expectations of my family, trying to get into the medical field, get a stable job and all that, but did not realize that I am more capable in other fields, and stepping out of that comfort zone, but having to also confront that with myself and my family. So there was a lot of struggles around that. And in addition to that, I have a very dear family member who struggles with the more severe end of the spectrum mental illness. So it's very personal work to me. So that's why I chosen this path to becoming a mental health provider, and hopefully in the future a social worker. So.
For me, I have always been interested in mental health and understanding why people live their lives the way that they do. Knowing their triggers, what may influence any passions, and how we build our relationships. So over time, I was able to identify the importance of mental health through all these aspects. And by working on my own mental health, I also found the motivation to want to continue outwards to help others not only live, but also to thrive with overall wellness, with proper resources, support, and self-care methods as well.
Okay, so here's an overview of the things we'll be going over today. So we'll be starting with destigmatizing mental health, and then going over the steps towards creating a plan for more culturally competent mental health practices. So this part's going to be a little bit interactive. I would like for y'all to type in the chat what mental health means to you. It could be good or bad, and then we'll go over everyone's answers. We'll just give y'all a minute or so. Take a look at the chat. Wellness, strength, mind-body connection, care, honesty with myself, acceptance, giving to myself as much as I give of myself, self-care, feelings, acceptance, self-compassion, these are really beautiful answers. holistic, support, love, okay, resilience, a couple more, well-being, meaningful relationships, self-compassion, negative, positive thinking, coping, balance, constant work. Okay. So these are really, really wonderful answers. And it looks like a lot of them have to do with taking care of yourself and loving yourself, and accepting yourself. So for the provider's perspective, when we're caring for our communities, you want to be able to look at our entire well-being in both the physical and mental aspects as community leaders, organizers, health providers, and advocates, because if our body and our minds aren't functioning at optimal capacity, then and whatever that capacity looks like for you, because everyone's bodies and minds work differently from each other, then how are we going to be able to give back to our communities? So those are just major things to look at when we want to be able to be mental health advocates for the people in our community. So at the end of the day, it's just making sure that your overall health comes first before serving others. So going into mental health stigma. So what is stigma? It's a feeling of disapproval by a group of people in society about a certain subject. So in this case, it's mental health. So can y'all type in the chat what forms of mental health that you've personally experienced? For example, like hearing phrases such as depression isn't real, it's all in your head. There's a few phrases in Tagalog that are stigmatizing, such as using a phrase like loko loko, or there's one that I learned called maluwag ang penilyo, which means this person's got a few loose screws. And so what are some examples that you've experienced in your life? You're not depressed, just pray. You're too emotional. You don't need a therapist. You're overacting. You're ungrateful. Maarte. What else? We all get stressed, just relax. Bahala na. What do you have to be so anxious about? We had it harder when we were your age. Oh, man up. I feel that. You're luckier than most. Stop crying, you're a man. Aren't you thinking of what we're feeling also? You're lucky to be born and live in America. Count your blessings instead of your problems. Yeah, so it looks like we've all experienced some kind of stigmatizing words directed seemingly at us. So Maryl will be talking more about destigmatizing and decolonizing mental health. Yeah, thank you all for sharing. It's really important to note that we're all together in this struggle.
Okay, so for destigmatizing and decolonizing mental health, for my sociology research proposal, I focused on intergenerational mental health and destigmatization, excuse me, with just trauma. So I found that many families do experience trauma due to colonization, immigration experiences, and also through adjustments of moving to the States and learning to assimilate to a new culture. There are also flaws in the way that some of our relationships function due to our differing belief systems and values. But even with that, older generations do refuse to admit any signs of mental health, and we instead choose to hide it or deny it. This can be due to keeping a sense of pride, to continue a strong reputation of our families, and just not wanting to, show that you're not feeling well. Many Filipinos do believe that with mental health and illnesses, that there's a weakness in your character and your ability to work. Although to an extent that this may be true, it's usually brought up in a negative way, like with the stigma that we were just saying with the examples. Um, in more recent decades, we have been having a lot more conversations about these things, with accepting mental health and wellness and learning to live with it and to work on getting better as well. So I see that we're finding a lot of ways to bridge the gap with our trauma and healing, and find more actions to move forward. So I found a lot of hope through creating this proposal, but it also brought light to me that there's a lot of work that still needs to be done for us to fully destigmatize mental health within our communities. Um, there was like very, very little research on this topic, and it showed me that a lot of this work is going to fall on us and the coming generations to increase awareness and progression in our communities and our families. Yeah, so sometimes I think like, I don't know where we can start. These mental health issues, they lie within so many different things like career building, surviving in an American society, health, heavy role expectations, relationship differences, lack of resources and necessities, economic disparities, racial injustices, enforcing religion that minimizes our identity, and constant denial of mental health existence through all of this. So, just that itself also increases our anxiety and depression in individuals. Like, for example, for myself, I didn't know before how to navigate my mental health with my family and helping them understand what it means to me and why it was so present in my life. I didn't know how to ask for help. I didn't know how to even start explaining how some of the things in our upbringing and the way that my family processes trauma may carry over to the way that our relationships work, or the way, the things they value and the differences, and how we aren't able to have like proper conversations sometimes just because we have so many differences. They didn't understand how that can affect emotional processing. Um, they didn't understand the concept that I can have all my basic needs met. I could have a house. I could have all the food I need. I could have, my own room. I could have all of those needs met, but still not be okay emotionally. Um, Sorry, give me 1 second. But yeah, so it took a lot of me accepting within myself that it's okay not to be okay, and that I can admit that I need help, because there's a lot of environmental effects that may change the way that we feel about ourselves or with our mental health, and just the general pressures of life overall. So sometimes that means us seeking community help or even professional assistance if need be as well. Next slide. Aurora, thanks. So how can we practice healthy mental and emotional spaces with difficult conversations? So with the need for more positive emotional guidance and reinforcement, Just ensure with others that you're trying to just have a discussion and not an argument. Be able to set yourself up before a talk, maybe have some grounding practices ready for yourself. If that means taking a deeper breath or remembering to pause before responding and just being aware of your tone and your intentions. View it as an educational or an informative conversation to be able to learn from one another's thoughts. Some other advice that I got from a mental health specialist at our work, he recommended that I should have resources on hand that can help them understand that this is also a science-based thing and not just something that's, something that I'm making up or whatnot. I've learned there's a lot of Filipinx American resources out there that kind of help out with addressing mental health within our culture. Those help a lot because sometimes they're also in Tagalog, so that may help if your parents don't speak much English, or they might understand better by reading through their own language. And generally, sometimes we also may have to just accept that we can't always change the way that people think, but we can do our best to find a medium to accept each other's differences and make compromises, and just understand that there are going to be generational differences with the way that our beliefs are set up. At the end of it, though, we need to also remember that our families do love us in ways that may be different than what we need. And it's also up to us to communicate where the understanding is lacking and how we can all improve the way we connect with each other also. Yeah, and next slide, go ahead, Aurora.
So this is a survey conducted by Filipino Mental Health Initiative in Alameda County. So FMHI Alameda County started in 2018 and was built up over the course of 2019, which was modeled after the existing mental health initiatives in San Mateo County and Solano County. So FMHI Alameda County's approach and mission is to uplift the immigrant struggles of Filipino Americans, be able to provide resources and create a network of culturally competent providers in our community. So earlier this year, we planned, actually since late last year as well, we devised 4 set questions. There's only 3 questions here, but to assess what the community needs in the Filipino American community are with relation to mental health. And we wanted to test out using words that were less stigmatizing, such as like the phrase mental health itself is like the stigmatizing phrase when you think about it. So we tried to replace words such as experiencing like mental illness with sadness, stress, emotional, words that are more relatable to folks on the daily. So we're still currently collecting data for this survey, actually. We will close the survey results actually at the end of this month. We launched it in April, and we aimed to have at least 200 responses, and we actually have a lot, but we don't have like a full overarching data analysis of everything yet, so this is still definitely a work in progress. So the questions that we wanted to address the most, especially in light of COVID-19, were: in the past month, have you experienced emotional stress like feelings of anxiety, sadness, hopelessness, loneliness, body aches, headaches, hard time sleeping, etc.? Do you seek help or support when you experience these types of emotional stresses? And if you knew that there was support in your community that understood your Filipino culture and values, would you be more likely to seek that help? So these were the results that we got in the middle of taking the survey from May, and we had 136 respondents, and about 50% of those respondents were transition age youth, like a lot of you in the chat today, so ages 16 to 25, and 94% of the people who responded did experience stress in the last month related to the pandemic. So that was a very significant number for us because of like how common it was for people to experience stress altogether as a community. And then 64% said that they were willing to seek help if culturally competent services were available. And we had another section of options of reasons why they would be unwilling to seek help. And 22% of those people said that they were reluctant due to shame and not knowing where to find those resources. So going into a little survey analysis of like reasons why stress levels are so high, is because of, first of all, the lockdowns. More people are at home and spending more time with their families, and there's a lot of intergenerational gaps that people experience. Like earlier when you all said in the chat some stigmatizing phrases. Those phrases are very triggering to some folks because it dismisses their experiences with mental health. So because of that, there's a lot of shame in being active in seeking help and encouraging help seeking behavior. So there's a lot of colonial mentality and prejudice tied to that, and also just Filipino core values that were just passed on generation to generation. A lot of Filipinos practice Catholicism, have Christian values, where just pray and everything will be better, or bahala na, come with me. So it's just like those types of intergenerational attitudes that are pressed onto our younger generations that make us feel that pressure to not seek help. So we hope that today's goal is to uplift that and encourage more help-seeking behavior in our communities. So to segue that, there has been efforts to create more culturally competent trainings for folks, culturally competent as in sensitive to our cultural values and needs. So we have a Filipino mental health first aid training that has been adapted into our Filipino culture called TAG. So TAG stands for Tulong, Alalay at Gabay. It was developed by Joyce Vives, who has a master's in social work. And she developed this training and was able to conduct it throughout the Philippines. And it was taught to us by FMHI Solano County. So this is a community-based mental health education approach for prevention and early intervention. And just a disclaimer that what I'm about to present is not to replace a full on mental health first aid training course. Okay, I'm gonna pause real quick and just take a breather. So for TAG training, there are 3 criterias that you want to assess in a person before trying to identify what type of help that they need. So the 3 main criteria is this person's ability to do self-care and basic hygiene impaired? Basic hygiene and self-care as in just, regular eating, sleeping well, and taking care of your body, showering, being clean. Number 2, engage and sustain meaningful relationships with people. And number 3 is their ability to work, study, or take on projects impaired as well. So okay, so Tulong there's 3 steps to assessing like the type of help that someone needs. So Tulong is translated to triage or help. Alalay means to assist, and Gabay means to guide. And so Tulong is generally for crisis and emergency situations. So you want to ask yourself, is this person in crisis? Do they have intentions of harming oneself or others? And sorry for any triggers this may cause. Do you notice any changes in this person's behavior, perception, or emotion? And is this person's ability to work, study, self-care, and engage in meaningful relationships impaired? So these three steps, you just want to assess like those three criteria most of the time. And especially in a crisis, do not be afraid to ask the person what they're going through. So if they do intend on harming themselves or someone else, like ask, because you have to be forward with them. Alalay means to assist. So in this case, a person is functioning, but they're starting to exhibit like more serious changes in their behavior, perspective, emotion, and perception. And again, you assess those three criterias. And also, are they willing to help themselves to get better? And lastly, goodbye is to guide. So the person is still fully functioning, but they've gone through some stressors that puts them at risk for higher stress and depression or anxiety. And they're just in need of resources, so seeking help and guidance. So what do you do in these three situations? So for Tulong, because it is a crisis emergency situation, you want to be able to stay by that person at all times and make sure that you connect them to a mental health professional immediately. Sometimes in this case, because a person in crisis may not be able to make decisions fully by themselves, so you may have to call the shots on what to do in seeking help. So, and then Alalay, you want to increase their family and peer support, and if needed, and the person cannot maintain those three criteria, just refer them to a mental health professional. And goodbye, which is just to offer resources and help, recommend exercises, books, best practices to alleviate the stressors before they get any more serious. So goodbye is definitely the more early intervention, prevention side of things, and increase their support and increase their mindfulness of their bodies. So that was a lot of information to process. I don't know if anyone has any questions in the chat. Let me check real quick. No? Okay.
Feel free to ask questions since we are coming up to the end of our time. We will do our best to address it in the chat. Yeah.
And
So, go ahead,
yeah.
Aurora.
Oh yeah, I was just gonna say, look forward to a possible mental health first aid training from us in the future. And so this is our plug. We have our main social medias. Phils for Justice is our main Instagram page, and we just launched our FHI Tayo page, which is our transition age youth group. We have our FHA Discord, which we started at the beginning of the lockdowns. So this is for our 3 prevention groups, our 2 high school youth groups, and then Tayo. And then we also have Queer Collective, which is for LGBTQ plus identified folks 16 and older. And those are every first and third Wednesdays from 5:30 to 7 p.m. Every Friday on Discord, we have something called Tayo Talks for people to just chill and hang out with us for an hour and a half to talk about any current events and ways to support y'all's communities. And here's our contact info. Yay.
Last slide, Aurora.
This is, oh, is it not there?
There we go. Yeah, so that's just our sources, and just want to remind you all to take care. Thank you all for your time. I think that's it. Thank you. Please do type your email in the chat box if you want to get more information about when we do our future tag training. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Aurora and Maryl, for such a great presentation. I love that y'all went into destigmatization, decolonization. You shared your personal stories, and I really love that you shared the survey and results. I think it really brings a lot of light of to, how our community is experiencing COVID-19. And I also especially appreciated even these tools that you gave us towards the end of your presentation, tag. I think these are things that we can really think about in our relationships with people. So thank you so much for an awesome presentation. I'll pass it over to Elena, who was fielding questions, and maybe folks sent over questions, and then maybe also there might be some questions in the chat.
Definitely. So the first question we have is, how can we help individuals facing mental health struggles?
Oh,
go ahead, Aurora.
oh, how can definitely first of all check in with them if they're able to tell you any needs that they have, and check in with them regularly, because it's kind of like an ongoing thing, and offer resources. As far as us, like we're no professionals, so like we would like to redirect people who need support in mental health to an actual professional that can help them. So that's what we typically do when someone is facing any mental health struggles.
What I have found helps to just kind of get started with assessing like an individual is just kind of asking, like, what do you need? Sometimes, people will want to talk about it and they don't want a response or advice. So it really does help to like kind of communicate and walk people through the kind of help that, they might be looking for. And sometimes they might even just be looking for how to get started with professional help, or sometimes people don't even have anything to say. Sometimes people just need your presence there. So I would suggest like making some kind of offers, but it always helps to ask first, what do you need? And allowing the other person to kind of like figure out for themselves, what do they need in that moment of time.
Those are great tips to help individuals who are struggling with mental health. Thank you for sharing that. And we do have a second question as well. And it is, how do you make older generations more aware of the importance of identifying mental health concerns and addressing them? I feel like Filipinx are so great at understanding physical concerns due to nursing backgrounds, but mental health still seems to evade us. And I can also just copy and paste this onto the chat box.
Sure. If we have time to answer, I can just quickly say.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, so I guess I'll share with my personal experience. It took a long time to get my grandparents to kind of understand, even my parents to understand what it means to have mental health issues. So there's not really like one answer, just because, everybody's family is different. But what, I would, once I finally said, it really sucked, but I had to say, like, I'm sick, for them to understand that mental health can be as much of a sickness as physical like issues as well. But that's kind of why, like, I recommended, if you can find resources that will speak to them in Tagalog, or resources that are in better like digestible language for them, try to find ways to narrow it down in terminology that they can understand. So it doesn't have to be in Tagalog, but if you can like bring it down to a level that's not so like complicated, just because mental health is complicated, and just remind them, like, there's nothing wrong with me, but there are these some days I just don't feel okay, and it may feel like this way. Sometimes I won't want to wake up. Sometimes I have a hard time focusing on school because, you know, I'm having a hard time. There's a lot of emotional pressures. You could also include physical things that affect you. You know, when you have anxiety, maybe your chest will hurt or it's hard for you to breathe. Just find ways to be able to communicate to them how it feels for you rather than just saying, oh, I'm depressed. Because generally, in my experience, I think older generations are just scared of the big terms. For them to hear, oh my God, you're depressed, we're not making you happy enough. So just finding a way to narrow it down to smaller things versus just using the medical terms. I hope that helps.
Yes, thank you. Thank you so much, Maryl. You also bring up a good point too. And I think by sharing the vulnerability about your mental health, you're able to help your elders kind of destigmatize that in their own minds as well. So yeah, thank you again, Maryl and Aurora, for your presentation. We're going to transition on. And I'll give it to Tanya or Erin.
Thank you so much, Elena, for fielding questions. And again, we appreciate Aurora and Maryl so much for an awesome presentation and just some really great insight into Filipinx mental health. Before we hop into our next presentation, we want to make sure y'all are taking care of yourselves as well. So we'll take a 3-minute break. We'll come back around 5:58. So go get some water, go use the restroom, do what you got to do, and or feel free to stick around. But we'll be back at 5:58 to hop into our next presentation with Mo. Super excited for that. So thanks again.
Rain is good for the soul. Crazy how I feel the most warm when it's cold. Drops hit the window and I jump down to the floor. I just assume this is when I would miss you the most. I'm like down. I've got this notepad where you laid your head. We used to go round and round, making love in my bed. We were in so deep, we could barely breath. But now I found a way to heal myself instead. Until I feel alive, baby. Until I feel alive. It's like something has to die to help you realize. Damn, I feel like we were in a weird place. Crazy how the person you love can just change. Now I am learning to realize we needed our space. I never hurt you, we used to be great. And you used to say, what goes around comes around so fast. Now just look at the way I'm moving on and stuck in the past. I deserve a love that is gonna last. But until then, I will just raise this glass until I feel alive, baby. Till I feel alive. It's like something has to die. Something has to die to help you realize. Damn, I feel alive. Turn the song up if you feel alive. I feel you feel. Let it all go, cause right now's the time. Let go, let more. So you can be free, yeah, free to fly. I know it's hard, but it's worth it. Cause damn, I feel alive. Baby, damn, I feel alive. It's like something
Hi everyone. So we're gonna continue. If you can come back from your break, I hope that you were able to take care of yourself even during these 3 minutes. So I will be introing the amazing Maureen, also known as Mo, de Nieva-Marsh, and she has an MBA. So I'll give a little bio about Mo. At Marin County Health and Human Services, Mo de Nieva-Marsh blends fun and humor while spotlighting the county's public health priorities with an equity lens. She's a fervent proponent of civic engagement among underrepresented groups and is proud to be one of few Asian American women in civic leadership roles in her community. You can watch her in action via the YouTube series Mo on the Go, #Mo on the Go. Prior to her work as a senior program coordinator for community health prevention policies and issues, Mo spent the past decade working in the nonprofit sector, shaping best practices for youth leadership development, organizing and using media to amplify positive social change. She also works as a deputy public information officer for the county of Marin during emergencies, including the county's response to COVID-19. Mo graduated with an MBA from Dominican University of California in 2019. So let's give a warm welcome to Mo. Woo.
Technology. Hi, everybody. So I guess this is my opportunity to also share a screen. So you want to continue? Yes, as I'm talking to myself and to all of you. And that's totally fine as well. All right, here. I want to see, I'm also having the same. I'm like, you know, when you're like, I know I'm going to present my full screen. Can you do it? There we go. Hi, everybody. I'm really excited for this opportunity to speak to all of you this evening. I saw that there's a lot of great representation from not only in the States, but also Toronto. I saw that. Tonight's presentation is titled Cultural Crossroads, Navigating COVID-19 Precautions and Family Expectations. Full disclaimer, I am not a nurse. I am not a public health nurse. However, I have both my parents who immigrated from the Philippines via Hawaii. They are both retired nurses. My sister and my brother are also nurses. I'm not saying that this is going to qualify me as a professional at all, but as our previous presenters had touched upon, and by the way, Aurora, Maryl, your presentation really shook me. I just have to say, I know that this is not like a let's cheerlead, but in this space of vulnerability, I just want to say thank you for that, because it's really challenging to talk about having these hard conversations, especially through a lens of trying to translate what they're saying is that I know they love us, but it's just challenging to talk about. And so this is actually a great segue to my presentation. I'm actually going to be sharing something personal that I've been experiencing through the last couple of months through the COVID-19 crisis. And I really hope that it will touch you as well and resonate. With that being said, thank you for Aaron for the introduction. See, I did the transitions, but yet I broke away from my key endpoint. But yes, I have 15 years of experience in public health and nonprofit experience, really at a crossroads of substance use prevention and mental health. For me, I might not be have all the alphabet soup, right? I'm not a licensed mental health practitioner. I'm not a social worker, but I can tell you, when you land in a space about substance use prevention and mental health, it is not far from your own personal lived experience. As someone who is an alcoholic, as someone who has overcome drug use, as someone who is formerly homeless, from the outset, when we judge people from visually, you think, oh, wow, that person has it all together, right? But really, we don't know that struggle. I'm pretty good at faking it till I'm making it, right? And as Aurora and Maryl had shared in those wonderful exercises with us, you know, we still are gaining knowledge while still trying to suppress our identity because that's what we experienced, right? During my time at County of Marin, I've also dealing with crisis communications, not just through COVID-19, but also through the Northern California fires back in 2017. In Marin County, if you're not familiar with Marin, Marin is located right north of San Francisco in the San Francisco Bay Area. We're right across the Golden Gate Bridge. Marin County is a population of 300,000 people, majority an older adult white population. We famously have made it in the headlines for our community doesn't support or understand vaccinations. That's one. We actually made national headlines on that. Another one is we still have segregated schools. So nationally, more specifically, our Sausalito Marin City School District also made national headlines of desegregating that school district. That was also a hard pill to swallow. You know, and also known as an older population, right? 1 in 4 of our residents in Marin are actually over the age of 65. And in that same population, another 1 in 3 are over the age of 75. So you already can tell this framework. But in a population of 300,000 people, how come our invisible Marin, as some people call it, why are they all pocketed diversity in certain areas? Right, our Latinx population is in the Canal neighborhood of San Rafael. You know, we also have our African American population segregated into our neighborhood space of Marin City. Why is that, right? You know, and so those are the things that I help to bring in my space professionally to ask those questions and to be that community liaison to make sure that if a policy is made to or created for the health, safety, and welfare of our community, how come those people who are benefiting from that policy are also not at the table, right? So previously I worked with the Youth Leadership Institute for 5 years advocating for social justice and youth-driven policy. So I worked with young people to, you know, do the data, advocate, and create that policy. And I do that in my current role. Simultaneously, though, I'm a Magic Mike karaoke champion. Not to steer away from the seriousness of this conversation, but for me, I've learned to deal with that life is life. And one of the things that I truly love that brings me joy is couch karaoke competitions with my family. So let's just keep it real. It got me through paying textbooks in college. So with those karaoke competitions. So in this space of vulnerability, this is hard. You know, we're at June and I started working in the COVID response in March. In the Bay Area, we started our shelter in place order mid-March, but somewhere along the way in March and April, I had to make a tough decision to help with the end of life process of my grandmother, my Lola, Erlinda in Las Vegas. And so this is actually, and sorry if this is triggering for folks, but I just felt like this is something part of important of the narrative of the story, that this actually touches upon anyone, this how do we navigate, you know, the public health policies to keep us safe, but also these cultural expectations of our family. So, you know, this quote really spoke to me. This is actually, so this is my, me and my Lola embracing back in April in Las Vegas. Ang aking pamilya, ang aking lakas at kahinaan. My family is my strength and my weakness. So as we are in this space, this conversation, and it will be a conversation with all of us here, you know, there are no right and wrong answers. Okay, I'm just gonna frame it up. Every decision we make is a calculated risk, even before COVID, right? And so the more we arm ourselves with knowledge, and there is strength in that. And that's how we will move forward with our actions, because at the end of the day, our actions will save lives, regardless of whether it's COVID. It could be even about mental health. It could be even about suicide prevention. It could be about just checking in on your friends and family who you haven't heard in from for a while. Oh, sorry. Family expectations. This is a photo of my father and my uncle. They are making tortang, out of eggplant. It's a Filipino dish with egg and smashed eggplant. They are obviously not physically distancing and they're not wearing masks. That's a whole other thing. But when we're thinking about family expectations, whether you're Filipino or not, or if you have Filipino friends, I think that family in general, that theme of family has a lot of things, cross-cultural, this expectation to eat together, sharing community, right? Whether it be cooking together in the kitchen or eating around in a potluck or a buffet, respecting your elders, whether it be your grandparents, if you're fortunate to have them still around, or just hearing the stories of the ancestors that were there before you, right? And more importantly, singing karaoke together, because for some reason that is cross-cultural, no matter whether you're Filipino or not. And that was definitely a family expectation while I was in Las Vegas. But this is more important of, asking yourselves or ourselves, what is the new normal? And how do you calculate risk, right? These are two photos. As you can tell, I'm the one who took the photo, but these are, here we are in a house for the weekend of Las Vegas. And I had to make a decision, right? I knew that my father had shouldered a lot of responsibility as being one of the elder members of his family. He was in San Jose. My other uncle is a caregiver of my Lola in Las Vegas. And yet we also know, because of the Filipino diaspora and the immigrant movement, that we had relatives also in Canada. We had relatives in the Philippines. We had relatives in Hawaii. We had relatives in Alaska and Southern California, so on and so forth. And so in this weekend, I had to navigate talking to my boss about the calculated health risks. Is this an essential travel? Yes. Will I be able to make it back? Because are there public health restrictions? Will I have to quarantine? All of these different questions. Also, I'm in a shared household with my partner, my husband, and I was so extra about it, guys. I was like, Donald, if I have to go to Las Vegas, we're going to have to quarantine on separate floors. How do we do that with one bathroom? And he was like, whoa, no. I will go with you to Las Vegas, because when we were partnered and married, and yeah, spoiler alert, I'm Catholic. And so we got married in the Catholic Church. We made a commitment. Family is family. And so he came with me because he said, quite frankly, I couldn't imagine quarantining you from you separately. And if there's a way where I can be help to our family, your family is my family. This is a family moment. And so the awkward part is having this pep talk with him, other than the fact that San Francisco International Airport looked empty, right? That everybody was physically distanced, and we were all wearing masks, and there was no food or beverage service on our flight. Not saying that that's a thing that we needed, but like these differences, right? Having to worry about car rental or even lodging, right? So if you're going to Las Vegas to visit your family, all right, I don't even have to ask hands. What is the expectation? You're going to stay at your auntie's house, your uncle's house, your cousin's house, your family house, because you need to save money to not stay at a hotel. Am I right? Right. So here I am trying to negotiate with my family to frame, nah, dude, we already have a car rental. We already have a hotel set up. We will be there and support you. But for the health, safety, and wellness for all of us combined, this is something that we need to do. And I will tell you, it took 2 hours, and that's a generous estimate of trying to convince my family. And as a response, they were like, you're disrespecting your uncle, you're disrespecting your auntie, you're disrespecting your lolas who's dying. I was like, whoa, all right. how do you navigate something like that emotionally? How do you navigate something like that with, my husband is Caucasian. He's the one white dude in the back, the striped shirt, right? How do I translate that to him as well, right? It took me a while to even express to him how monopole worked, okay? Which he totally understands. But I even, so, you know, with that, and I know that my conversation, you have to ask and navigate when it even comes to, you know, something like this. Granted, this is a very extreme example. During that same weekend, I had to coordinate FaceTimes and Zoom and Facebook Messenger video chats at different hours because of different time differences, all to coordinate everyone to say goodbye and to also plan what next steps are. Because in this time of COVID, we were very fortunate that she didn't have to spend her hospice moments alone in a hospital. We were able to navigate, and I have to say, I think it's because of all the nurses in my family, they were able to be advocates and say, no, I'm a nurse, I'm a hospice nurse. She can live, she can end her life with dignity and respect at home. But let's think about our other brothers and sisters or our family members or community members who may not have that same, let's just say it, opportunity to advocate or to know what rights they have to be able to advocate for such a thing, right? Did you know that for 2 weeks she was in the hospital by herself because there was a miscommunication between the ambulance agency and the hospital? 2 weeks alone after she suffered her stroke. And it wasn't until later on that we brought in our other family relatives, we were able to navigate that. So those are the types of questions that I not only had to ask myself, but ask my family. You know, we tried to do as much physical distancing as possible, but, you know, even before we entered the house, my husband turned to me and he removed his mask. And I said, whoa, whoa, why are you removing your mask? And he said, I love you, Maureen. But if you think that your Filipino father is not going to hug and kiss you, even though he's super macho, you have another thing coming to you. If you don't think that he's gonna try to feed you, you really think that they're not gonna ask us to sing karaoke on a shared magic mic? All we can do is not just hope and pray, but we wash our hands, don't touch your face, try to avoid hugs. If you hug, hug on the side, but it's all a calculated risk. Even us being here is a calculated risk. And we will take the proper precautions when we get back by taking a COVID test and quarantining, but we're already at a risk here. So let's just steer into the skid. And I said, and sure enough, we didn't even make it halfway up the driveway until my dad came in and hugged me. I was like, whoo. So let's talk about public health, right? I'm pretty sure, you know, we've all now in the last 6 months have become strong epidemiologists. We've learned different ways to flatten the curve, you know, and all of these other things. We've heard about in the Bay Area, there's a movement of guidelines of social bubbles. I'm pretty sure, I have an example here of a poster I created in my COVID response. I'm not a designer, so I didn't design it, but I created the text for it with our public health leadership. But, you know, this is an example from a Marin Public Health. You know, as Marin reopens, you can slightly expand your social circle. What's a social bubble, right? And so the recommendation is, you know, stable, consistent groups of 12 people or less, all members of a single household. The poster is here. You know, we even have physical distancing, but I just want to frame as not only our public health officer, who is also a COVID survivor. So that was nutty. So, you know, I was in that emergency operations center, very much working closely with him. And so for all of us to have to get COVID tests after that, that was a harrowing experience, right? But then also when Aurora and Maryl was talking about mental health stigma, there's even a stigma now with COVID, right? Right now, we're navigating a quarantine. My husband and I point up because we have a third floor and he's upstairs. We're navigating it. I know that I look very put together right now for this presentation, but I'm not going to lie to you. I'm going to go back to this space of vulnerability. My husband and I are actually experiencing symptoms of COVID. My husband actually just lost his sense of taste and smell. He is going back for his second COVID test. I'm having my second COVID test tomorrow. I've had the experience of headaches and achiness and all of these things. Trust me, I will take care of myself after this. But you know, the thing is with the stigma of COVID, how do I not know that this is COVID versus my usual summer cold or my usual summer allergies or my usual summer respiratory issues because I have asthma and sleep apnea, right? So there's a stigma even that, because I even shared with my closest circle about what's happening with me and my husband. And they were like, oh no, I should have a COVID test. I'm like, I didn't say we have COVID. Just, it's not even confirmed, right? But we're experiencing that. There's a parallel already with COVID-19 stigma and mental health. You know, when we talk about the precautions, we're talking about hand sanitizer, if we're lucky to even access hand sanitizer, right? Really the key thing of washing your hands, soap and water, face coverings, masks, and physical distancing. And I really want to touch upon, I don't know if you've noticed throughout this whole entire talk, I kept mentioning the words physical distancing, okay? There's even a stigma around that. You know, we talk about social distancing a lot in the news or in the framework of public health, but here in Marin, we really tried to advocate using the words physical distancing. And the main reason is because, you know, just because we are physically distancing from each other doesn't mean we should emotionally, socially distance each other from each other. I'll say it again. Just because we are physically distancing from each other does not mean that we need to be emotionally or socially distancing from each other. We just need to find other creative ways to be able to do so. And so I just really want to thank again, you know, our previous presenters, because to touch upon such health resources specifically catered towards the Filipinx community, right? I'm going to take those resources and touch upon and have conversations back. I'm really excited. And I want, as a public health professional, to bring back those resources for my Filipinx community here in Marin, right? So this is a poster that helped to create. Again, I am not, you know, I don't have a bachelor's in public health or all those other things, but you don't need to have all that alphabet soup to be an advocate. You don't need all those degrees in order to be someone, to support someone. You know, strangers are just friends you've never met yet, right? I know I'm passing out all of these different sayings because I really mean it, right? We have a responsibility to our community, right? And the key thing about the word community, unity. And you've all said it before, even as you were describing your organizations and the work that you do. Resources equal strength. Make no mistake, you know, as we're talking about mental health and stigma, when we're working in cross-cultural spaces. I remember when I was working in San Mateo County and we were trying to recruit young people and their families about resources. And they were like, my family doesn't have a problem. I don't have a drinking problem. I don't have a substance use problem. Why are you targeting me about these resources? But when we framed it about family strengthening, these are the ways that we can strengthen family and communications to strengthen your family unit. Come with us, come learn with us. That was more well received. And so that's the same thing about, you know, these resources. Strengthening your own mental health will help support your family and loved ones. I've been watching a lot of RuPaul's Drag Race recently. I'll just say it. And so I will quote the fabulous RuPaul saying that, you know, if you can't love yourself, how in the world are you gonna, well, I said, how the hell are you gonna love anybody else, right? And that's the same thing here. How can we be true advocates about, you know, not only mental health, but just in general resources, right? To our family, our pamilya, if you're Filipino, or even our family. I like to use the word family. It's our friends who are family, our chosen family, right? Because God knows I have some family members that I don't really need to have, right? But they're part of who we are. And so by strengthening the tools in your own toolbox, right? you have an opportunity to be that ambassador or that liaison for change, right? So this is an opportunity that I want to actually have all of you add into your chat box. You know, what are alternative ways for, you know, your family, your familia to stay connected, not only in times of COVID? I want you to think outside the box. Like, what strategies have you been able to do, right? You know, I'm just gonna toss out some of these as you're entering them into the chat box. You know, we know about social media. God knows my mom's been sending me Facebook Messenger filter messages and gifts. Zoom sessions. Who doesn't like a potluck? I know I celebrated my birthday in March via Zoom and invited them all. You know, creative staycation because we can't really go anywhere. I'm celebrating my 4th wedding anniversary next week, and hopefully Donald and I don't have COVID. But if we do, I know where we'll be, in our living rooms, hanging out together, watching TFC, the Filipino channel. Letters, packages, phone calls. I know in our Filipinx community, we have balakbayan boxes that we send to our friends and relatives back in the Philippines. I do the same thing too. Also money remittance as well. But nothing says, you know, touch points like a good old phone call. And so I just want to encourage some folks in the chat box. Oh my gosh, as I'm trying to like see if I can access this chat box. I can't really, oh, there's the chat. Here we go. I'm seeing, oh God, you know, I really need to get together with the whole Netflix party. I'm seeing Netflix party, just Netflix party. That's cool too. Skyping with the family has always been, yes, during and post COVID, having familia in different corners of the room. Zoom brunches, yes. Oh, instead of cookouts, we do cook-ins and distance cook together. Last Friday, we did salmon. I'm expecting a salmon recipe in the chat box. Okay, Bobby Roy? This is wonderful examples. And feel free to keep sharing those examples. Actually, I'm pretty much at the end, but I just wanted to, you gotta love with all of the technology in the world. Let's go, here we go. Okay. You know, I have my email address here. Feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn. But I did want to read something, and I tried to memorize it, but I'm not gonna lie to you. So I'm just gonna read from my handwritten notes to end on this point before we go into general questions and answers. You know, culture is one of the most fundamental ways that shapes how we live in the world. We are both biological and cultural beings. So when a disease spreads through large parts of the world's population, we can cope with that in both biological and cultural ways. In this case, we can help family members navigate the choices between their own, you know, desires and the greater good by working to help modify both their expectations about COVID-19 and offer them acceptable and safe alternatives like the ones that you had recommended in the chat box. Remember, it's not an either or, okay guys? It's a both and. We can still stay connected while, you know, practicing public health practices and flattening the curve, but at times you'll have to make decisions that may feel uncomfortable. I am so fortunate that I even had the ability and the support from my employer to say goodbye to my grandmother. I don't know how many spaces would allow me such an opportunity. I think it's because of the nexus of the work that I have, I'm doing in public health, the fact that I'm a disaster response worker for COVID-19. Maybe it's also because of my good relationship with my supervisor, but I also recognize the privilege in that space. And so with that, I also now serve as an advocate for my other coworkers who are experiencing same and similar things, telling them to reach out to their employee assistance program in spaces of anonymity to be able to reach out for therapy or other, you know, responses and support. Cost should never be a barrier to receive health and resources. Stigma should never be a barrier. However, for some reason it has. And so I hope with this, you information or just conversation or just honestly this space to be able to share something so personal that I'm still experiencing right now will hopefully inspire you to be even better change advocates in your communities. But also your community is our shared community. And even though we are virtually apart right now, we can still keep having these conversations and keep sharing and learning as a community. So with that, I just want to say thank you, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Yay, thank you, Mo. I'll give a big round of applause virtually. That was awesome. Just want to note that you taught me more about grief, which is something that like I and many of us here feel too. So really appreciate that, and just how health in our society isn't necessarily a given. So that's why it's so crucial for non-health professionals to know about health, and for health professionals, like you were saying, to be able to advocate and rebuild collective care in the system. So thank you so much. Elena, do we have any questions DM to you?
Yes, we do. So we have this question that asks, how do we address cover our COVID with family members who insist that the pandemic is just to cause paranoia, as the news avoids emphasizing healing and instead talks about more deaths? How do we navigate a realistic conversation to stay safe?
So, right, thank you for that question. And I will just start with, there is no perfect answer, right? There is a tool in mental health and public health called motivational interviewing, right? When you are having a conversation with someone who may not want to hear all the things, like they don't want to hear the resources, etc. But, there is a way to be able to hold a conversation where at the end of the day, you'll be able to pull out the best in that conversation and hopefully help them realize and connect to those resources. Now, I'm not saying let's all go study about motivational interviewing and use these techniques on our family members. No, but if you have time, why not? We're all sheltering in place, right? But I say this because there is some truth to that, right? Okay, maybe they don't like about data and statistics. Maybe they think it's all a hoax. So if that's the case, are you really going to talk to them about data and statistics? Don't you see the numbers? This is how many people are being affected, or all. If that is not resounding or resonating with that audience of your friends or your family, then let's not. So let's talk about something that we can all really agree upon, like a universal truth. Do we care about the health, safety, and welfare of our loved ones? Just let it sit. And it's funny because I do a lot of talking, so I'm just going to let that sit for a second, right? Trust me, it is hard to talk to young people in my community or in general about substance use prevention, okay? I used to buy underage, all right? I used to drive drunk. I should have been stopped. I should have died. I can go on and on, but you wouldn't think that. You wouldn't know that I lived out of my car for months, right? You wouldn't have known that I had to detox, that I was, when I was in school, and yeah, I rep that I was at Dominican, but like during my undergrad, I was pretty much a functioning alcoholic during my undergrad, right? And leading that double life. How many of us have felt like they had to live a double life in their space? We hear the phrase code switching, right? And before we even jumped onto this call, I was sharing to the leaders of this webinar, how I feel so blessed to be in this space because I was still struggling with my own cultural identity of being a Filipina, because I have pretty much whitewashed myself throughout my public health career in order to be able to be in spaces, not to quote Hamilton, to be in the room where it happens, right? So I get people to be comfortable enough with me because I'm just white enough. And then I get into that space And I go, just kidding. I'm bringing everybody who's brown and black with me, and they're amazing. But how many times have maybe you've experienced, or someone else that you know, been tokenized in that space, right? So I know you're like, why are you going with this? It goes back to the same space about how to have these difficult conversations with your friends and family. Put yourself in their shoes. You know, what resonates with them? It's health, safety, and welfare. And ask them then, if you care about my health, safety, and welfare, because you love me, let's talk about some solutions. What does that look like to you? You know, when you're in a job interview, right? And you're like, what does success look like to you? You know, those behavioral questions in an interview. You know, it's funny, I'm in the middle of COVID and I'm still doing job interviews because it's important to like keep yourself on your toes and be ready, right? That's also something interesting to navigate. I think that's the best way I can answer this question. I know I appreciate your patience in the roundabout way I've answered it, but you know, it boils down to, let's keep it simple. What does health and safety and love look like to you? And when you frame it like that, you can start having a more neutral conversation about things like face coverings, like flattening the curve, like washing your hands, like just because it's open doesn't mean you have to go to it. Still stay at home. I'm sorry if that was a long way, but I hope that helped answer this person's question.
Yes, thank you, Maryl, for sharing that. It's also funny because I just learned about motivational interviewing and one of my public health classes. So I definitely think it's worthwhile to ask someone, you know, why are you thinking these things? Where does it come from? Maybe it might be an experience, as well as, you know, emphasizing that we need to find a commonality sometimes, and that may be, you know, the health and the safety of everyone. So thank you.
Yeah.
And I just wanted to open it up to anyone else if you had any additional questions for Mo to answer. Please feel free to unmute yourself or put it down in the chat. If not, we can move on. Okay, so it looks like I'm not getting any additional questions so far, but I did want to backtrack a little bit, and I apologize because I did miss some questions in regard to the prior presentation, and we got some really good questions as well from that. And the first question, you could also refer to this on the chat, just a little bit of scrolling involved, but the first one was, I always look to social media right when I wake up and right before I sleep. Could this be harmful to my mental health? And Aurora responds, Aurora, would you like to read your response?
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I said social media right before you wake up and sleep is honestly something I do all the time. But if you feel like social media is becoming detrimental to your health, especially with all of the viral videos going around, news about tragedies and COVID in general, it's good to assign yourself an amount of time that you want to spend on social media and then start picking up other activities to fill up the rest of your time that makes you feel more joyful. So for me, I got a skateboard recently and I like skating around outside my house, and it's actually a really great social distancing activity. I highly recommend. And for me, social media is definitely one of the ways that I escape as well. So and because the media always is covering, and then my parents always have the news on in the background as well, I feel like I'm always getting a constant input of current events and stuff, and it's a lot of pressure. So I try to fill up my social media feeds with just things that make me laugh and feel joy, because I feel like I haven't been laughing as often, and it sucks. So yeah, that's my response.
Great, thank you. And then Maryl also has a response to this question. Maryl, I invite you to respond, and if not, please let me know
Sure.
if I could support you.
Cool. I'll read my response. So with social media, it is best to minimize your consumption before sleeping. So, when I previously worked with a peer advocates for wellness internship, we did talk about sleep and like how to have proper sleep practices. So one of the things was they recommended that you don't really engage in social media or on your phone before you go to sleep, just because it does affect your REM cycle because of the screen lighting. Like there's like a blue lighting to it. That's why on some apps and your phone overall, you can turn it to night mode, where it'll kind of minimize the amount of light that kind of goes onto your face, especially because if you're doing it right before you go to sleep, you're most likely laying in bed in the dark, and that's the only light or the only thing that you're focusing on. So it does affect you physically. But with media specifically, things are always unfiltered, and you'll get different feelings from all of the different things you'll read. You might read news, you might read how people are responding to the news, you might be reading, people's mental health events, or just your family's posts on Facebook. There's so many different things that you can read through social media that will affect the way that you go to sleep. And also how when you wake up, and if that's how you start your day, you might feel all those different kind of ways. So I do recommend giving yourself time to just take care of yourself and start your day properly, or go to sleep properly with routines that work for you. I will be honest also, like I love social media, so I'm on it before I go to sleep and when I wake up. So I'm not perfect either. That's my guilty pleasure, and I've been trying to like stop doing that, but I think especially since I've been so busy recently, it's the only time I get to really do it. But I try to not make it the last thing I do every night, or the first thing I do every day. So sometimes, you can also set an amount of time so you don't overconsume and realize, oh my God, it's been like 2 hours. I thought I was going to only do 20 minutes. But also forgive yourself. And, it's normal and human to be curious about others. And that's okay also. So, yeah, thank you for that question.
Thank you, Meryl, for your response. And I can totally say that I'm guilty, at looking at my phone once I wake up and before I go to bed. But I'm definitely implementing the screen time app so that, I'm on top of it. And we're getting a lot of good variety of questions. And moving on to the next one, how do you deal with pressure from the members of the organizations that you lead? And Meryl, if you can come back to answer this one again.
Sure.
Okay.
So for me, I said with managing pressure with organization members, we always remember to take time for ourselves to also unplug, just to avoid burnout. You have to allow yourself to take a break and rest. Like for example, today I was feeling really sick this morning, but it wasn't like a sickness. I just felt so heavy. My stomach was hurting. My head just felt off. I was just, why do I feel like this? There's no reason why I would feel sick right now. And it made me realize, I've been stressing myself out, and I am kind of, hiding it from myself because I'm being productive. I'm getting things done and taking on meetings that I need to be there for. But it reminded me I need to take time to decompress as well, and to do it intentionally, not just like, oh, I'm going to join another Zoom call that I'm hanging out with my friends. Like that might be fun, but that's still more screen time. There needs to be more time for ourselves to just, just sit, just relax, breathe, get some fresh air, take a walk, do something like that. So especially with us doing all of our work, for most of us at least at home, our workspaces are also our homes. So the tension of that may linger, and it's important to kind of go through clearing methods to just go from work energy to like personal energy, and just channeling, like maybe with your partner or with your family, like have some time to talk about what happened at work, but also check in with each other, and just think about yourself physically also. You can't be, as organizers, we want so bad to just take care of everyone or try to find ways to help everyone as much as we can. But how can we do that for others if we are not even saying, like, doing the same thing for ourselves? Like, it's easier said than done, but it's so true. We really need to like take time for ourselves so we can serve others to our full potentials.
Incredible response, Meryl. Thank you for that. And just to echo, we need to rest, y'all, and we need to take breaks. And just to remind you all, rest is also an act of resistance, right? And the last question that came up was, how do you help create an environment that helps the person having trouble be more open to talking about their mental health troubles, or make them feel safe enough to talk about what they're doing? And then Aurora, if you can share your response.
So what we do in our support groups, our Thayo and Queer Collective, is we establish community agreements at the beginning of every meeting. So that looks pretty much really similar to a lot of other community organizing spaces that we've been in before, but the most important one is confidentiality and establishing that these are four walls. It's a safe space for you to talk about your struggles. And also, there's one that we call Oppression Olympics, and that means don't try to compare your struggles to someone else, because everyone's struggles in the room are valid, no matter where they come from. And just like establishing that you are helping someone going through mental health struggles, that you're being held accountable to keeping their experiences safe and confidential, and that you won't break that confidentiality, because that's probably the number one thing that would make someone feel unsafe. So, and just be there to listen to them, because the reason why people go to therapy is so that they can release the struggles that they're going through to someone, and that's probably the most valuable thing that someone can do when they're struggling with mental health.
All right, thank you so much, Aurora. Oppression Olympics is so real, and you remind us, you know, to listen for the mere purpose of listening and not just to react. So those are some of the all the questions actually that were asked. If these questions in particular have gotten your mind rolling, feel free to ask additional ones. If not, we can move on. I'll wait a moment to see.
I just wanted to add something to the last question, just like a little.
Oh, sure thing.
Yeah, no problem.
Go ahead, Meryl.
So just something I read recently is people were suggesting, instead of saying, "Oh, I feel you," it's better to say, "I stand with you," because you can say, "I feel you," but maybe you don't know how they're feeling. Maybe you can't completely empathize with how that person feels with whatever they're going through. So saying, "I stand with you," just helps it be more of a supportive, like, I'm here with you through it kind of thing.
Great. Yes, I stand with you. Also, Mo, if you have any last explanations that you'd like to share before we say goodbye today, please feel free.
You know, that all of the suggestions and all of the things that we were able to talk about in this space, how powerful is that, right? And this is a virtual space. Could you imagine if we were in a room together, right? And I've written so many notes down. I'm like, oh, I'm gonna apply that tomorrow, not tomorrow, today. You know, I think that's the most important thing when you attend a webinar or a workshop. Can you immediately take what you learned and apply it the moment you walk out the room? And I feel like, even though I'm not walking out of my house because I'm quarantined and taking a COVID test tomorrow, but but I'm walking out of this virtual space. You know, I really want to echo what Maryl and Aurora had talked about in terms of social media. I had a mental health breakdown this past summer, full on. You know, in my role as a senior program coordinator, there was a lot of community engagement right? And I could not, it's funny, I work in a substance use prevention space and a mental health space, but I was in denial of my own red flags because I was more concerned about the needs of the people around me, whether it be my loved ones or my colleagues or the community that I served. And when you also live and work in the same community, that's also like double pressure, right? So same as community organizers, that's your baby. Like this is your passion point. You're in this work. But if you don't take a step back to take care of yourself, we hear that saying with the oxygen mask when it comes down in an airplane, right? They always say you put the oxygen mask on yourself first, and then you put it on somebody else. So similar what Aurora and Maryl were talking about, you know, as community organizers or organizers in our own organizations or leadership spaces or whatever it may be, you know, that self-care aspect. I'll be honest, what I learned from my break, and I took seriously 6 weeks off from work. And I recognize the privilege and the opportunity to be able to do that, right? And I entered into an outpatient mental health treatment program. And it was funny because when I shared that with my friends and my colleagues and my family members, like, why? Going back to your activity, Aurora and Maryl, why? You're not crazy, right? It was because I worked myself so hard and I could not even tell that I was experiencing signs of depression and anxiety. And that it only took one more event and it caused traumatic, disastrous results where I literally had to physically take time off. So going back to what Maryl was suggesting, I know that was like a very big, I'm just gonna dump and share that. And I apologize, I wanna make sure I de-escalate the feelings in that space that I just shared before we thoughtfully transition out of this, is that it's important to also take note and inventory of your own telltale signs when you don't feel well. And I don't mean just physically well, I mean your own mental health, right? And then also just like how you have an emergency list, like top 3, like your mom or your relative or like outside, you know what I mean? Like in them. I also want to recommend creating your own mental health contact list. Who are the 3 to 5 people that if you are in, and I don't want to use the word crisis, but if you are experiencing some of the red flags that you note, right? These are the 5 people that you have a conversation with ahead of time and say, I respect you, I care about you, I know you do the same for me. I know I've been experiencing some mental health challenges, or just I want to be able to talk to someone outside of my therapist, outside of my psychiatrist, outside of my family, outside of my partner. Can I add you to this list? It's almost like a no questions asked, right? And I will tell you that that was the best thing I could have done this past summer. And I still utilize that list to this day, especially as with what happened with my family, especially in this COVID response. I was working 6 days a week, 15-hour days in the first 2 months of the response, right? That's a lot, right? And so I just want to make that suggestion as well for our own shared toolkits.
Awesome, thank you. That's a really great thing to add to our toolkit. And just to add, one more thing, we want to end on a hopeful note. Someone says, I would love to hear how you can imagine reuniting with friends and family post-COVID. Oh, and this question's for you.
Oh, for me? I thought that was like, oh, that's all. For me, other than hugging the crap out of people, okay, what I hope and imagine is that the same speed and urgency that we had to have as a government, a system, a community in order to get us online and have everybody to have hotspots or Chromebooks or whatever it is for distance learning, et cetera. What happened to that same urgency before COVID? So for me, to end on this positive note, is let's remember this whole COVID space has shown us that we can move quickly. And after we recover from COVID, it's not COVID, remove COVID. It's what's the next thing that we can tackle on as a community, because we can do it with the same expediency, the same urgency, and the same passion. And I'm just sad though that it took a global pandemic in order to bring that to light. However, this is not the global pandemic for Oaks, is not the first. We had SARS, we had avian flu, but why didn't we address it then? So in any case, just wanted to say that I look forward to more cookouts, more food sharing, more laughs and more karaoke, but also let's also keep the eye on the prize. You know, it doesn't stop after COVID.
Yes, yes to all of it. I just want to say thank you to all our participants for asking your questions, and to our speakers today, Aurora, Mo, and Maryl, for answering the questions. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you for all the insight and all of the hope. We can move to the next slide just to close us out. So again, additional ways to support, you can take a screenshot. We shared this earlier, but of course this isn't an extensive list at all of our of the resources and community organizations that we should be in collaboration with. Next slide. Okay, so this is our final webinar of the COVID-19 virtual series. Thank you for all of you, whether you tuned in from the very beginning or this might be your first time. We thank you so much for being with us, and we'll be back soon, you know. And if you ever need connection with us too, please make sure to email us or stay tuned through our Facebook, YouTube, and Instagram at Filipinx Health SF. We really mean it when we say, like, we want you to continue connecting with us, or if there's opportunities for us to connect with you or to post your events as well. So yeah, thank you everyone. Yeah, have a good rest of your evening.
Thank you.
Bye everyone.